Hi, I'm Greg Howlett, and I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about a modern hymn called I Run to Christ, written by a couple friends of mine, Chris Anderson and Greg Habegger. By the way, this song is available for free to churches and organizations for use. Pretty liberal in the usage, the licensing, and you can get it, download it off of their website, which is churchworksmedia.com, churchworksmedia.com. Check out what they have there. This is my favorite hymn that I've seen on the site so far. It is good because, from a musical standpoint, for several reasons. First of all, the melody is great. It has a nice natural shape to it, and very, very compelling. Secondly, the harmony is very, very good. You know that I complain a lot about church hymns. For the most part, they're going to be pedantic, way, way too simplistic, as written in typical hymnal. This song is way, way better than that. There's some things that are really nice about it. For example, if you look at it, you'll see that they use a lot of minor chords, which doesn't sound like much, but that's a big improvement from a lot of the songs you'll see in your hymnal. You'll see minor chords all over the song. Second thing, I like the way they move the progressions by steps, not just jumping around. We see that right away. You start on a D chord, and then they want to move to an A chord, but instead of just jumping down to A, you notice what they do. They use an inversion of A over C sharp. So it's a first inversion A chord, so you can move by steps. And then from there down to B and then to A. So a nice stepwise move. Okay? So that sounds really, really good. I like that a lot. The other thing I like here is the fact that they use interesting melody notes in relation to the chords. Now, a lot of us are taught if you're going to play a C chord, the melody note needs to be what? C, E, or G. And that's very, very typical, but you get better sounds if you move away from that. If you move, for example, to the 7th, or even the 9, or sharp 11 or 11 or 13, those are much, much more complex and interesting sounds. So right there at the end of the first line, you have this chord. That's a E minor 7, but it's got a D on top. D is the minor 7th of that chord. Later on, you see this chord. That's a G chord with a sharp 11 on top. That's really nice. You see this. This is E minor with the A on top. That's a natural 11. And then G major 7 with the F sharp. G major 7 with the F sharp. F sharp is your major 7th of that chord. And that sounds really good as well. Those are good decisions. They make the song really, really sound good. Now, that being said, you might say, well, Greg, what are you going to talk about? If you like it so much, why are you going to change it? Well, remember a couple things. First of all, as a pianist, we have more flexibility with music than what would be written for a congregation. A person writing for a congregation has to walk a fine line between being interesting and being accessible. In other words, if you get too interesting with the chords, it's unsingable. Here's an example. You know that I love this kind of sound. That's a rubbing ninth. It's a flat 9. Well, if you have a flat 9, that means you have two notes that are a half step apart. A typical church congregation is not able to deal with that. Two notes that are a half step apart. As a matter of fact, most volunteer church choirs can't deal with that. Only professional singers are going to be able to handle that. So you're not going to see those kind of chords very much in church music, period. Certainly not in a hymnal, but if you see it, you'll see it maybe rarely, once in a while, in maybe church choral music, choir-type music. Other than that, you won't see it that often. But as a pianist, we're not under that restriction. We can do whatever we want with harmony, and we can make it more interesting. Now, that brings up a question. I get this all the time. I got this last week after I posted When They Ring the Golden Bells. Somebody said, okay, Greg, I like that a lot, but what good is it? Would you do that in church? Would you do it when people are singing? And the answer is clearly no. You cannot change chords if everybody's expecting something else. There's only one time when you can change chords. Well, there's two times. First of all, when you're playing by yourself. Or secondly, when you're playing with other musicians and you're all on the same sheet of music. So you all know what everybody's going to do. Either you work it out ahead of time or whatever. But if you don't have that, you can't go changing the chords around. So this kind of thing that I'm about to show you is more for when you're playing by yourself, or maybe accompanying a soloist where there's no harmony involved. Obviously, if you have a soloist, she's singing melody, so you can do pretty much anything you want harmony-wise, and it will just work with what she's doing if she sings the melody as written. All right, so that being said, let's talk about some things we can do to work on this song and make it a little more interesting for a pianist. Okay? Now, there's several things we can talk about. I want to tell you one really quick. This A over C sharp that you see through the song, they use that a lot to smooth out the bass line. Okay, this sound. Okay, which is fine, but it's sticking with triads, and triads is what you typically see in church music. One of the things we can do as pianists is we can give that a little bit of a little injection of excitement by turning that into a C sharp half diminished chord. A over C sharp could be turned into an A flat, or excuse me, a C sharp half diminished. It's just a slightly better sound. Okay, there's your triad in first inversion. Okay, let's do it this way. Okay, so you could do this, which is okay, but this is a little better. So every time you see that A over C sharp, you could change that to a C sharp half diminished chord. All right, one of the things you can do, of course, is you can change out an entire progression for another progression. Let me show you that first. I'm going to go to one of my favorite progressions, which is sharp 4 half diminished, minor 4 6, 3 minor 3, flat 3 diminished, 2 and 5. And if you've stuck with me long, you know I love that progression. We could use that here on the first line. And there's how it sounds. Okay, so you got G sharp half diminished, that's from sharp 4, G minor 6, F sharp minor, F diminished, E minor, and then A7. Once we get to this D7, let's talk about how we finish out this line. Notice that the music calls to go to G, okay, which is fine, but the problem is once you get to a G, you move down to E, which is a movement by a third, which is something that if you can avoid, you probably should. We can get around that with just a little bit of effort here. We're going to do this instead. We're going to change that G chord into a B minor 7 so that you move from B down to E, okay, which is down a fifth. So we're changing a movement by a third into a movement by a fifth. And you might say, well, you're coming off a D7. Okay, so now you're going from D7 to B minor 7, which is a movement by a third. That's what you were just trying to avoid. So what we can do instead is we can insert a chord in between the D and the B. We're going to insert a C. Okay, C sharp, excuse me, C sharp in between them. Here's how it would sound. Okay, there's your D7, and then there's your C sharp, and you can just play. You don't even have to play a chord. You can just play a C sharp. There's your B minor, E minor. Here it is again, the whole line. Okay, so that's something you can do there. The next line, I am going to stick with what's written, but I'm just going to throw a few more passing chords just to smooth out some of the steps. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to play a D like it calls for. Okay, I'm going to use a C sharp half diminished instead of that A over C sharp. B. Now let's throw in a B flat diminished here. And then once we get on that chord, that wants to resolve probably down by half step. And what we can do is we can go to a D over A chord. Okay, so we're changing the progression so we move more in steps. Now we're going from D to C sharp half diminished, B minor, B flat diminished, and then we're going to play D over A. Okay, so it's a 1 over 5. Okay, and then from there we want to get down to an E, A, D, which is your 2, 5, 1. We're on D over 7, so we're just going to put a few passing chords. Okay, so from A, we're going to play G minor 6, F sharp minor, and then we're at your 2 chord, right? So we're stepping down. Here's how it sounds. So there's your progression there. Now, moving on, the third line, which is really, really beautiful. It starts with the A over C, sharp again. Let's change that to C sharp, half diminished, B minor, okay? Now, it's moving from B minor to G. So let's just stick an A chord in between B minor and G. Okay, so now instead of, we're just going to stick a chord in the middle, just to make it smoother. Let's see. Okay, once you get to a G, it's funny, the music sort of is written where it keeps stepping down. Well, it steps down and then it goes down by fifths, which is fine, movement by fifths. I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to make it steps up. So I'm going to go like this. G sharp major 7, G major 7, and then I'm going to go to G sharp diminished, D over A, B flat diminished, B. Okay, so I go. See how nice that is? Okay, let's do it again. B minor, and then we can go to E. So we're going to get to the same place. We're getting to a B minor chord. We're just getting it a slightly different way. E minor, F diminished, D over F sharp. Now, why did I put the F diminished in between those? Just to smooth out the motion. You're going from E to F sharp. I just stuck an extra chord, the F, in between E and F sharp. Just a nice sound. That's really the way you have to play it, because you don't want to play an A natural against an F sharp diminished chord. So the first time I played it, I made a mistake. I went to the F diminished chord too early. You really can't until you get to the word, or the syllable A, abundant. You need to wait till you play that chord. So like this, like that. It's a nice sound. And then I'm going to play as written. Okay? Now you're to the last line. The last line, you can do any number of things. You can go back and use one of the ideas from the first two lines, because that's what the last line is. It's a repeat of the first two lines. So I showed you two different ideas for those two lines. You could pick the one you like better, or you can play what's written. Let's see, I'll play the second line. Let's just do the whole thing. Okay, so those are some little things that you can do as a pianist. Hope that's helpful to you. We'll see you next time.